The following program is brought to you in part by the film Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace.
Welcome to another Leon Charney Report. We have a really eclectic and exciting show tonight.
My name's Ora Seidner. I've been working for the Tzahal Disabled Veterans Organization for the last 8 years. I live in Tel Aviv. And I work at the fund, which is the fundraising branch of this organization, mostly raising funds from friends abroad, from friends and supporters overseas. We have friends organizations in various countries. Beit Halochem is one of 4. Beit Halochem is a recreational rehabilitation and sports center, the likes of which doesn't exist anywhere in the world. It is really a place where disabled Israeli war veterans can come with their families for everything that has to do with their rehabilitation from the moment they leave the hospital. I think that one of the unique things about Beit Halochem is that it's a place where there's a meeting of generations on the one hand. Older disabled veterans serve as mentors to the very young and new ones, such as the ones that we are seeing this week. It is a place where the members can bring their families so that rather than be home and be depressed about their new life, their unfortunate situation, their disability, their wives and their children can come here and meet with families of other disabled veterans. So there's a natural support network that is formed as well. We try and encourage our members to be active in a variety of activities with an emphasis on sport as a rehabilitative tool. So if at first we encourage them, even in their wheelchairs, to try and hook their hands up to a table tennis racket, once they persevere and if they are good at a sport, we also invest a lot of funds and effort and the best possible coaches and equipment to turn them into international competitive athletes. They then become part of the international circuit of competitions and represent Israel in the Paralympic Games, for example. In the London 2012 London Paralympics, we had a gold medalist, Noam Gershoni, who was an Apache helicopter pilot from the Second Lebanon War. His helicopter was shot down, and Noam miraculously survived but remained in very, very critical condition. And he had never really played tennis before. Maybe a couple of times for fun. He started coming to Beit Halochem Tel Aviv and immediately showed really great progress and skill. And within 4 years, he not only beat every one of the best wheelchair tennis players in the world, but he won the gold in London. We had a couple of others as well over the years. He's the most recent one. Beit Halochem, which actually means the house of the warrior. And we use that word because of the sense of, or the house of the combatant, because really this is where the real battle begins for these wounded war veterans. This is the battle for their reintegration into society, the battle for their own physical rehabilitation. And what we want to do here is we try and accompany each and one of them and never let them fall. From the moment that they're in the hospital and they come out from their initial rehab, we bring them here to show them that basically they can continue dreaming, that everything they wanted before can come true and will come true if they believe in themselves and if they allow us to help them. So again, using sport as a rehabilitative tool, we try and find an activity for each and every one of them. We enable them to, as I said, bring their families here. They can come here during their rehab. They can come here once they have jobs. They come here in the afternoon. They can attend a variety of arts and crafts workshops as occupational therapy as well. There are special programs for the younger veterans. You could see behind me is a wall filled with photographs of young disabled veterans from the last 7-8 years. What you'll see in all of the photographs is they're all smiling, and they all have their heads raised very high and very proud. I think that nobody who comes to Beit Halochem ever feels sorry for himself or herself. And that is something that we encourage here very much. The umbrella organization, the IDF Disabled Veterans Organization, has more than 50,000 members. Unfortunately, we're one of the largest not-for-profit organizations in Israel. Beit Halochem Tel Aviv is the first and the largest. It was established in 1974, just in time to receive the thousands of wounded veterans from the 1973 Yom Kippur War. The second one was built in Haifa, the third in Jerusalem. In 2011, we completed and inaugurated the one in Beersheba. There is still a fifth one scheduled to be built in Ashdod to serve the more than 6,500 disabled veterans who live in the southern coastal region of Israel. Beit Halochem is a second home for a lot of our members. For many, it's a first home. Although most of our members, even the more severely disabled ones, have families and jobs, there are some, specifically the ones with PTSD, with post-trauma, who unfortunately cannot maintain jobs. They cannot keep a job. Many of them can't keep their families together either. They come here every day from morning until evening when we close, and this is a first home for them. But they do find here a very, very warm and embracing support network and system and professionals who are here to guide them and to help them. And many of them are able to return to perhaps part-time jobs, but they certainly are here a good part of the day and almost every day. Some of them were wounded physically, but PTSD is something that can either occur immediately after they come out of a combat situation. Sometimes people simply witnessed certain atrocities. They weren't actually in combat. We have people who suffer from post-trauma because they were in a situation where they saw body parts or they lost people close to them, right next to them. That has left them traumatized for the rest of their lives. So most of them are not necessarily physically injured or wounded, but mentally, of course. It's very, very difficult to diagnose this. Over the years in Israel, they have learned to diagnose it. I believe Beit Halochem is a unique concept that doesn't exist anywhere. One of the reasons it's very unique, as I said before, it's a meeting of generations. It's a place where our members can bring their families. That doesn't exist anywhere. Even more important, we wanted to create a place where they, instead of having to have their physiotherapy treatments and hydrotherapy treatments in clinics or hospitals around the country, we enable them to have them here so that they can come and combine their treatment, sport activities, leisure with their family, all under one roof. And that really doesn't exist anywhere. We host, over the years, representatives from different governments and different countries that have heard about us and come to learn about this concept. Not sure how quickly they could emulate it, but we've hosted Australian war veterans once. The situation there is quite different, of course. It's a vast country, and they really have only very few number. But there are Americans who come here every year and are hosted by us for 10 days. This is a very special project that was initiated by a woman by the name of Judy Schaefer. She set up a charity called Heroes to Heroes, and she tries to bring 10 disabled American war veterans with very severe post-trauma to Israel on a healing spiritual trip. But one of the most important things behind her idea was that she wanted them to meet Israeli disabled war veterans with similar injuries, with post-trauma, and have them spend these 10 days together with their Israeli counterparts. 10 days meaning sleep in the same room in the hotel with them, travel the country, and most important, spend a whole day at Beit Halochem here, which is the first time that these Americans are introduced to this kind of a facility. It's such an eye-opener for them. It's very, very moving and very frustrating at the same time, because they realize what they could have that they don't have. They have kept in touch with their Israeli friends that they have met here. I have kept in touch with some of them, and just this week when hostilities began here, one of them, who lives in New York, emailed us, and I called him. He was so concerned about his Israeli friends, and he felt so proud that he had been to all these places that are on the news, and all he wanted to do was come here and be here with us. So it was very, very touching. But they have kept in touch with their Israeli friends. That was part of the idea. I think one of the first things they feel when they come here is a real sense of camaraderie with their Israeli friends, because the first thing they say is, we know exactly how you feel because we've been fighting the same enemy as you have. They're very, very pro-Israeli, and yeah, they have in fact been very good emissaries. Some of them have gone back and given very warm and supportive interviews to local media in the U.S., telling them about Beit Halochem and about what they've seen here. The government, out of fairness, I should really explain that the Ministry of Defense is responsible and looks after everything that has to do with the disabled veteran's disability from the moment he's injured for the rest of his life. So all of the medical care and whether he needs a prosthetic leg or medication or treatments, that is given to him by the government, including his disability payments. That goes directly into his bank account. But you know, we say that from receiving disability payments every month, a person is not going to rehabilitate. I'll tell you, not everybody wants to be labeled disabled, even if he's actually been found to have disability. There are people whose disability isn't, you can't really notice it. They might have internal injury, or they might have a prosthetic leg, and it won't disturb them, and they won't need to come here for treatments. Obviously, these centers cater more to the more severely disabled. Somebody who not only needs the treatment here, but he can't really take his kids to the neighborhood swimming pool because he can't get into the water because it's not accessible for him, or because his burns and scars are so horrendous that he doesn't want to show them in public, and his children don't want anybody to see. But then his kids come here with him, and they see that other fathers are a lot worse off than theirs. So this naturally will serve more the more severely disabled. So if we have about 50,000 members in the entire organization, there are about between 11 and 12,000 that use the Beit Halochem centers. Most of them live within a driving distance of Beit Halochem, of course. There are people here as old as the War of Independence, in their late 80s. And they really serve as mentors to the younger ones. You know, somebody who just lost a leg or lost his eyesight, and obviously he and his family really think that their world has come to an end. It's certainly turned itself upside down. They come here and they see people with very similar injuries and disabilities that not only have they moved on, they've gotten married, they have professions, they've become contributing members to society, and this really encourages. It's probably better than any sort of psychological treatment or anything that you know you would have to. It's really something that just sort of happens here. It's a wonderful support system, and apparently it really works. People feel very, very encouraged when they come here. We're probably one of the only organizations that really, really hope we'll never have new members. Right from the beginning, we have our volunteers who go to the hospital and visit the newly injured soldiers. We try and find a disabled who has a similar disability, and he will visit the wounded. So if he's lost a leg, we bring somebody who's a leg amputee. God forbid, somebody who's lost his eyesight. A blind veteran will come and visit him. That's done right at the beginning, in the first few days after their injury. Of course, there's a process. They first have to be discharged from the IDF. Once a medical committee establishes that they are indeed going to remain with a disability, then they become members of our organization, and of course we encourage them to come to Beit Halochem, and this entire organization actually is ready to receive them. You know, the organization is not only the Beit Halochem centers, it is also helping their families cope with the situation. It's helping ensuring that our Knesset enacts laws that will uphold the rights of the disabled veterans. It's making sure that there are accessibility issues that need to be addressed. There's a whole range of it's a whole package, basically, that this organization has taken the responsibility for. We are the only legal organization, legally responsible for the well-being of the IDF disabled veterans. The Tzahal Disabled Veterans Organization, even though it's called the IDF Disabled Veterans, it includes disabled veterans from the police, the Mossad, the Secret Services, and the IDF. Now, the Beit Halochem Centers have opened their doors to victims of terror as well, even though they can legally not become members of our organization. But because these centers we are the only centers that have these accessible facilities for disabled, we have allowed the more severely disabled amongst the civilians, victims of terror, to use the Beit Halochem Centers. They become members here, they become involved in our sport activities, their families come here, just like our members. Well, it is very much so. You know, just as an example, this past week since the hostilities began in the south, unfortunately they've had hostilities for a long time, but since it got worse, we have hosted here in Beit Halochem last week 2 groups of widows and orphans from the south. This week we're hosting just families from the immediate settlements around the Gaza, the perimeter around the Gaza district. We bring them here for a day of fun and activities from morning to night, with special activities for the kids and with different lectures and workshops for the parents. We did this during the Second Lebanon War as well. We actually had families of disabled veterans from the north come and sleep here for a few weeks, just to get them away from the shelling. There are people who come here every day and have all their meals here. They're joined sometimes by their family members for some of the meals or for other activities, and they leave at night. This center opens every day a little before 6 in the morning, and it closes sometimes after 11. And it's open 7 days a week. But I really think that we should serve as we do serve as an example to other countries. And as I said, I know that it doesn't exist this way anywhere in the world. It really is very, very unique. Members of this organization are really a cross-section of Israeli society. We have Jews and Arabs, Christians, Muslim. There are Druze that serve and that are wounded and become. We even have members from the South Lebanese Army that were recognized by the government as IDF disabled veterans and given the rights of IDF disabled veterans. So you can find at any given Beit Halochem Bedouin Muslims who fought and were wounded, and Druze and Jews and Orthodox and men and women. So really it is a melting pot. It is a cross-section of Israeli society, but I can't really say that there have been any attempts. I really think this probably serves as a mini model and a true cross-section of Israeli society.
Welcome to another Leon Charney report, and we're going to end the year with a bombshell. We're going to have, you've heard the name Ben-Gurion, I'm sure, one of the greatest personalities of the 20th century. And any book that you look about or two about great personalities is the name David Ben-Gurion, really the founder of the Jewish state. And here is his grandson, Alon Ben-Gurion, who happens to be a great hotelier and manager of the Waldorf Astoria. I'm not going to talk about hotels, we'll talk about Israel. And one of the reasons he's very interested in showing his face on this show is that he's a director of a very important organization in Israel called Beit Halochem, which is really an organization which helps disabled veterans of Israel. And unfortunately, there are about 50,000 of them. So, Alon, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Leon.
You carry a great name.
Thank you.
By the way, who wrote the best biography of David Ben-Gurion?
Depends who you ask.
I asked, what's his name? He's on the show. He says it was his.
Mickey Barzoar.
Mickey, right.
I think he's got a good biography. I will say that the most in-depth will be Shabtai Tevet. And I think he took it as a mission in his life after David Ben-Gurion had died in '73. And he's working it, we're already in 2001, he's not finished.
Great stories about your grandmother, Paula and David. Did she have that much influence on your grandfather?
A lot, and not in the negative aspect of influencing his political decisions. She devoted all her life to him, and she really, really took care of him to the little details of life. For example, where the slippers are near the bed, the food that he had to eat. She invented the famous thing, which a lot of people know about, which is, she called it, the kuch-much. What is kuch-much, you'll ask? It's a combination of yogurt and applesauce, and you wouldn't touch it, I wouldn't touch it. But it's amazing, he ate it, and after she died, after the 67 war, in 68, he vowed that every day for the rest of his life, he will eat that dish.
Really?
So take, for example, the best dish that you like, and decide that you're going to eat it for the next 6 years, every day. You think you'll enjoy it?
No.
He stood by it every day till 73.
Why? He thought it was an order from Paula?
But she really took care of him. And, you know, when came lunch, it doesn't matter who he sat with. I remember once he was sitting with Zalman Shazar, who was the president of Israel, and came the lunchtime for David Ben-Gurion, and she walked in and said, Mr. Shazar, you sit on the side, David has got to eat. And David went like a little boy and had his lunch, and he went back for discussion.
Were you able to spend much time with him, Alon?
I spent time with him. It's only when I grew older that I really missed him, because, you know, you take things for granted in life. He was my grandfather, you know. Right. I didn't look at him as the prime minister.
And one of the greatest personalities of the 20th century.
But he was an amazing, amazing person. It's only afterwards, when you reflect, I reflect back on him, you see how in depth he was, how deep he was. I always remember, I tell the story that when I was 12, he loved books. I loved books. I loved history.
And he loved all types of books. I mean, I've read a lot of his biographies.
Yes.
He was a philosopher and yoga and Japanese and Indian. He loved everything.
Correct. And he was, but everything was into the detail, and it doesn't matter to who he talked. And at that time, I liked Roman. I was interested in the Roman history. I was learning it in school. And he had a system. Whenever came your birthday, he had a little black book, which is displayed today in Sde Boker in the museum. And the names of all the children, the grandchildren, their birthday was there. And when the day before the birthday, he used to call up and say, Alon, you've got a birthday tomorrow. What do you want? But it's not a choice you've got. It's not a choice that you've got, I want a toy. No, it's got to be a book. So you knew what you've got to do. I said, I want a book. Okay, which book you want? I said, on the Roman Empire. No problem. The next day, they'll give you a series of 6 or 12 books, but then you'll sit with you. Alon, why the Roman Empire? Which period in the Roman Empire? So at that time, I told them about Hannibal the Great, and he said, let me tell you. And then he went into a lecture of 30 minutes, why he thought that Hannibal was one of the greatest military leaders in the history of war. And you know, I'm standing there, looking at him, a kid of 12. You know, if my daughter would look at me, she would say, duh. And he was just giving a lecture, pathos and serious. And it's not that he's talking to someone who was 12. He really, really gave his beliefs. And so he was talking also to children. He was talking like an adult. There was always a mission, a message behind what he said. It was fantastic.
How old were you when he died?
I was 22. I was wounded in the war of Yom Kippur.
He saw you in the army?
I was in the hospital. I was tied to a bed in Beit Halochem Meir, not able to move. I spent about 100+ days on my back without moving.
Beit Halochem Meir is the hospital in Kfar Saba. It's called Meir Hospital.
Yeah. He was hospitalized in Tel HaShomer.
Oh, were you a paratrooper?
Yeah, I was an officer in the paratroopers. And he was in Tel HaShomer.
That's another hospital.
That's another hospital closer to Ramat Gan.
You got to speak in these terms. Yeah, we have a lot of bellhops who watch the show in Waldorf, too.
I know. I forget sometimes that people don't know where it is. Right. But it's funny. When I got to Beit Halochem Meir, I did not know where I am. And when they told me Beit Halochem Meir, I said, where is this? Because I didn't know that if I'm a prisoner of war, felt by the Egyptians, I'm in Israel. And I had to interrogate the doctor who was with me in intensive care. till I figured out that this is a hospital, Israeli hospital, and not the other side. But I was in that hospital. He was in another hospital, the distance about 10 miles, 15 miles. My parents live in a town called Haifa, which is about 45 miles north of Kfar Saba. And every time they used to come and visit. So first they visited him because his hospital was south than mine. And on the way back, they used to visit me. That Saturday, they switched. They came to me first. And at 5 to 12 at noon, the nurse called my father and said, go to the hospital. And that's when we heard on the radio that he passed away.
How old was he when he died?
86. His father was 86. He always said that he will die at that age.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. He always said that.
Did he die a happy man? Asa Weitzman, who's a close friend of mine, said that no Israeli prime minister ever went out as a happy man.
I don't think that he was happy. Let's put it this way. Happy is a subjective question.
Was he content that he had done so much to form the state of Israel?
Correct. The question is, did he leave satisfied? I would put that terms. He was asked. He was asked by a girl in Dimona, Mr. Ben-Gurion, were you ever satisfied in your life? And he just turned to her and he said, never. I will never be satisfied, because when you're satisfied, what have you got to look forward for? You become pompous, you become lazy. I will never be satisfied.
Is that why he kept going back into politics? Rafi, he formed the Rafi party with, at that time, I think it was Shimon Peres and
correct.
Moshe
that is after
Dayan.
the breakup. But, you know, there was afterwards he went to what I call the exile, that he was left alone. And
right.
I was growing up at that time, so I remember him.
I met him in a Don Carmel in his later days.
Yeah,
Haifa.
he liked to go there.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing he never did was comb his hair, which I admired.
Well, that's good. That's not bad. That's not
me.
bad.
I'm the same shape.
That's good. But I want to tell you something. He had a, you know, he used to do exercise at his old age.
Yeah, he was doing a thing with Feldenkrais.
Correct.
That's a big thing today, by the way.
I want to tell you something. He's one of my idols because, you know, at the age of 70, he was able to take his foot and put it behind his head. Ask me if I can do it, and I'll give you the answer, no.
It's a special technique, I know.
Yeah.
My wife uses it. And,
really?
Yeah, and her mother teaches it. And this is a guy who invented something. It's not a chiropractor, and it's not an osteopath, but it's some kind of movement
it's amazing.
To the body.
It works. And you know,
right.
if you take David Ben-Gurion, he was not an athlete. The last person that you look as an athlete.
Right.
He used to march a little bit, maybe once a year go swimming and all that. And he was able to do that. So it was amazing.
It's unbelievable. The biggest decision of his life, Ala Talena?
No, I don't think so.
The founding of the state?
Founding of the state. Founding of the
Tell
state.
me, I've heard the Weitzman side. I've never talked about the Ben-Gurion side. What was this thing between Chaim Weitzman and David Ben-Gurion?
Can't tell you much about it. Don't know much about it,
really?
To be honest with you. Yeah, you know, this is, you're talking about, Ezra Weitzman maybe was around then. I was not around. I'm a product of after the State of Israel was born. So a lot what I hear, and again, you've got to understand that the relationship that under which I grew up, he was a grandfather to me.
Right.
He was not a politician. I never looked at him as, I never walked in school or in the Boy Scouts and said, my grandfather's the Prime Minister of Israel. My friends didn't care about it. I didn't care about it. It was just a natural thing.
So you had a normal life. The
Thank
fact
goodness.
That, that you were, and your father was in the police, am I correct?
My father was in the military. You know, he fought. My father grew up in Israel, went to Kaduri. This is the agriculture school in the north of Israel.
It's the same school as Rabin.
Rabin was a class a year earlier, younger than him.
Really?
And then they went to, you know, they went to the army. He served in the army. Then he went in the British Army, fought the Germans for 6 years. Came back, War of Independence. After the War of Independence, they had to build the police. He went to the police force. Well, became some kind of a general there, brigadier general, if I'm not mistaken. That's the right rank. And after that, went to private business, and he went to became the general manager of a textile company. And then he retired, and he's a happy retired gentleman now.
Was he very close to David Ben-Gurion?
Yeah.
They talked a lot?
They talked a lot.
You know, at the end of the day, it's a lonely position to be the leader of a country. When I worked with President Carter, he said, you know, one thing I want to tell you, Leon, presidents don't make new friends. It's basically your family and the older people who've been with you through a long run. But, you know, because everybody wants something from the great political people. So you always turn to your family, usually.
Correct, but Ben-Gurion he had one mission in life. and that is the state of Israel.
That's right.
He wanted to bring a country which went through the Holocaust, bringing people from all the diaspora, putting them together, and started to teach them what does it mean state, what is statehood, dealing with the borders, dealing with our neighbors.
What made him such a Zionist, do you know? Was it the fact that pogroms in Russia?
You know what? We asked him that once. I said, when did you once decide? What?
Yeah.
You know, how many people do you know that wake up in the morning and that decide that they want to be to build a country? And I asked him that question. I said, what prompted that? He said, when I had questions and my father, and nobody could give me an answers, I decided I'm going to find the answers. He found the answers.
Amazing guy. We'll be back right after break, continue with Alon Ben-Gurion. He's going to tell us a lot about what his organization does to help the disabled war veterans in Israel. It's called Beit Halochem. He knows a lot about it because he was injured on October 6, 1973, which was the beginning of the Yom Kippur War. And he was further than the Bar-Lev line, which was on the border of the Suez Canal. So we'll talk about that. We'll be right back. Interesting man. His name happens to be Alon Ben-Gurion. Aside from being the grandson of Ben-Gurion, he himself is very interesting. And obviously, we all know that David Ben-Gurion was, as I said before, one of the great men of the 20th century. Probably in Jewish personalities, probably maybe Freud, Ben-Gurion, and Einstein were, in my opinion, probably the three greatest personalities of the 20th century. And I would suspect that Ben-Gurion probably was friendly with Einstein also.
Very much.
I know. Abebe was on the show, and he was dispatched by Ben-Gurion to try and convince Einstein to become the president of Israel. Yeah. But Einstein...
It didn't work.
It didn't work. He didn't think it was the right thing to do, but he was a great Zionist, Einstein.
Correct.
And when you talk about these personalities, boy, it's like another league. Alon, tell us, unfortunately, what happened to you on October 6th. You got hit.
Yeah, hit. Yeah. October 6th is my saga of the Yom Kippur War, I call it. Yeah, right. The war started at 1:58. I was wounded at around 9 o'clock on a rescue mission. A long story. The biggest problem was getting me out of the battlefield. It took about 48 hours. Lost a lot of blood. Lost a lot of friends, soldiers, officers. Finally, they got me after 48 hours back to a hospital in Israel. As I told you before, when I landed in the hospital in Kfar Saba, which is a city next to Ra'anana in the middle of the country. I never knew that there's a hospital there, and I wasn't sure if I'm in the hands of the Israelis or the hands of the Egyptians because of the situation under which I was wounded. And I spent for over 100 days on my back. I was injured, badly injured in my leg. They wanted to amputate my right leg. I was hit in the head. I had complications in my kidneys and my lungs. To make a long story short,
you look healthy today.
Thank goodness. There's luck, doctors, a lot of will.
In my book, this is a book that I just came out with, the Charney report. I have an interview with Kahalani.
Oh.
The great general.
Absolutely. He was wounded also in 73.
Also, and he stayed in the hospital, he told me, for 1 year.
Correct.
And thank God he's okay.
Yeah. Hey, that's an experience. You take a young guy and you put him in the hospital. It's not exactly the natural place. But we got out of it, and we started physiotherapy like a little child. I had to learn to walk because the leg was no good, and a lot of work with that. At that time, I became one of the veterans of the Israeli army, and after that, they were building what is called Beit Halochem, the warrior house. The first one was in Tel Aviv. And the basic idea was to create a place where the veterans can come and get some, not only medical treatment, because that's more you get in the hospital, but you are getting more treatments like you can swim, you can have all sorts of sports activities which are geared to you, because
disabilities.
When you've got your 2 legs and your 2 hands and you go to a swimming pool like a normal person, it's one thing. We were all healthy people when we went to the war, Some of us lost limbs, some of us lost more than that. You come out and you've got to learn how to do things. It's all over again.
that's not an easy experience for some of us. The rehabilitation takes a lot. You need help with that. You don't feel like you don't know what to do. So that was the first establishment that did that. I became a member there. Part of my treatment was in swimming pools. Like you do physiotherapy in other places, one of the best things to do for injuries in legs and other parts is in swimming pools. I got a lot of help there. Tremendous, went up tremendously, started to walk and all that, so it was great. And if you take it today, 73 was many years ago. You'll ask some of the young kids today in Israel, what is 73? It's history for them. We've got today over 50, close to 50,000 disabled veterans. Now, in addition to that, we are adding all the people who were injured through the terrorist acts in Israel, and unfortunately, we've got a lot of them lately. So unfortunately, we've got some more members. This is one organization that I really don't want more members, but we've got them, and we would like to help them and accommodate them.
Has to be done. I mean, I've seen these centers, and they're great places, and it lifts the spirit of these people because the disabilities are profound. And you can have a basketball league or a soccer league or a tennis or swimming, which is also my interest. Obviously, you're helping a lot of people. I want to ask you a question. The Yom Kippur War, there's a lot of, I'm sure you've studied it because it was very important to your life.
Still is.
Were the Israelis, did they not heed the intelligence reports? I mean, what was the story there? The story was Eri, the chief of intelligence?
Yeah, all the intelligence.
Yeah, what do you think of that whole thing? First of all, you told me an interesting story about your father and grandfather.
My grandfather. Well, we all have got our traumas in life.
Right.
This is Yom Kippur, most probably is mine. The question that you ask, when you get older, when you're young, when you're 22 and 21 and you want to be a fighter, these people at that age, they want to fight, they're geared for that. When you get older, when you go through the wars and all that, you see how terrible and how horrible it is. And you always ask yourself a question, how we can prevent it? In Ben-Gurion, after he retired from politics, he was invited by, Arik Sharon was the commander of the southern region, Pikud Darom, what we call.
Right.
I think Bar-Lev was there, and there were several other commandos there. Goradish was not there. It was before he moved into the command of the southern region, and that's what happened. He was the commander of the southern region. The change between Arik Sharon and Goradish took place a couple of weeks before the war started.
Right. Sharon came back as a reserve general.
Correct. He came as a reserve. He was the head of one of the divisions.
Right.
And Ben-Gurion was invited by the army, and Sharon was conducting the tour. I was then, I think, an officer of the paratroopers, and I was holding one part of the Suez Canal with my unit, but in a different section. They didn't come to my section. My father joined my grandfather, and they explained to him, they stood on the Suez Canal on our side, and they explained to him, this is the enemy on the other side. That time we were still enemies. And he told them what is how many tanks they've got, and how many soldiers they've got, and how they're built, and etc. And after they explained to him, he asked them one question. They asked him, do you have any question? He said, yes, I've got one question. What will happen if the Egyptians will decide to cross the Suez Canal in 80 places at the same time? So all the generals, of course, they had the maps and had all the answers, and we will do this, and we will do that, and we will do this, and they gave him all the answers. On the way back to the helicopter, my father, who knows his face expressions better than anybody else, said to him, Father, what do you think about the answer? So Ben-Gurion said to him, I don't buy it. Well, unfortunately, he was right.
And Ben-Gurion was not a trained military person. He was a minister of defense, right?
Correct.
Maybe it was called, as we say in French, seichel,
Absolutely, a lot of seichel.
Right of seichel. And in that war, Moshe Dayan went down. There was a lot of rumors that he had panicked.
Correct.
I knew Chaim Bar-Lev very well. And Chaim very well is a very stable guy. And when you heard his voice, till he talked, you could walk a mile.
And he did miracles in that war.
He did. He was up in the north with Musa Pellet and that
Correct.
whole gang of generals, and then he came south, and he stabilized the south.
He's one of the people that most probably, when everything will be open.
He's underrated.
He's absolutely underrated. I think that when all the books will be open, and we will read everything, we'll find out that he had a major, major contribution to balancing it and then moving to the attack.
And that war brought Golda Meir down.
Correct. A lot of us brought down. It was a sad war. It was a sad war, and in the back of our mind, you can't change history, but in the back of my mind, and I read every book that comes and every research that comes on Yom Kippur, could of this war been avoided?
I happen to be in one of the books. It's the story of the Yom Kippur War by. I think it was the British, the Times or something, and I was in Israel during that war. And I entered Syria without a passport and Egypt without a passport. And I remember the destruction there. It was just impossible to understand. It was incomprehensible.
Yeah.
The surprise jolted the people so much.
Very much, and the question, could we have avoided it? But there comes, you can't use the if word. If you can't turn the wheel back. The other question, if it didn't happen, would we have gotten peace with Egypt? So you get one. I had a dinner with Jian Sadat in Los Angeles once, and we spoke about it, and it was very interesting for me to close the gap on some of the understanding of the thinking that took place on the Egyptian side and launching the war and that. So, it's can't turn the history back.
All right, we got about 2 minutes left, Alon. I know you're not a politician, but you have good genes. Where do you think Israel's going today with the Palestinian issue?
Ben-Gurion, I mentioned it to one of the gentlemen here before. When you've got all these experts talking, when Ben-Gurion had one word about them, all the experts are experts in the past. There's no experts about the future. Definitely not me. I'm not a military person. I'm a hotelier. Again, but I'm an Israeli.
Right.
And Ben-Gurion said, I've got 1,000 prime ministers in Israel because everybody's got an opinion. So I've got also a little one, just a little one.
Let me hear your little opinion.
Going through what we all went through in Israel, and every one of us is a veteran of war, some physically, some mentally. We are in a pretty bad situation now. I'm very optimistic. I think that, first of all, the solution is not a military solution. The solution is a political solution. And hopefully we are going to get there. The blood brings to blood. This is a very, very vicious circle. I spent many, many of my years in the uprising of the Intifada afterwards, before I came here, serving in the territories. I saw it, I went through it. The solution is not a military solution.
And I'm sure you meet many Palestinians in your hotel who probably want to be at peace with Israel.
And again, I remember when I was in the territories, whether at Gaza, in Hebron, in Shati, all these places, and Rabin was the Minister of Defense then. I'm talking about 87 when the Intifada started. He was the Minister of Defense there. And he used to come and give us instructions, the units and all this. He says, what we need from the military, there was instruction, put the lid on the pot and give us enough time to solve. Nobody thought about Oslo then and other things. And that is the purpose. So, the generals think one way, that they can solve the problem. In my mind, it's a political solution. Now, is Arik Sharon the right person? Most probably is Arik Sharon the right person. But again, at the end result, it's a political solution, not a military solution.
That's the last word, and you're doing great work for Beit Halochem, which
Thank
is
you very
for
much.
disabled veterans, and you're welcome to the chair anytime you have a free minute.
Thank you.